Dr.D.Veerendra Heggade, Dharmasthala has become a well-known place not only for the pilgrimage value, but also for education, health, naturopathy, yoga, Ayurveda, and development-oriented projects. Shri Kshethra Dharmasthala Rural Development Project, promoted by Dr. Heggade, has helped millions of families in the state of Karnataka. The government of Karnataka has been promoting self-help groups of women of below poverty line categories since 1999. Today in Karnataka, we have approximately 9.5 lakh self-help groups. This movement is the largest poverty alleviation program in the world. Many members of these self-help groups are employed by taking up various income-generating activities. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the generous donation given by Shri Kshethra Dharmasthala Rural Development Project to Flood Relief Fund. I am happy to acknowledge the August gathering here that Honorable Finance Minister Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman represents our state, Karnataka, in the Parliament. In a short span of 15 years, in active politics, and she has worked hard and made all of us proud by becoming the Finance Minister of our country. It is therefore very meaningful that she has come here today to inaugurate this conference. I hope this conference will come out with recommendations useful to the community and make the lives of people better. I thank Dr. Veerendra Heggade and others for inviting and making me part of this wonderful program. Thank you, one and all. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words and for your valuable time. On account of some other engagements, Shri B.S. Yeddyurappa is leaving the program. Thank you, sir, for your grace presence.
Moving further, we have Dr. Larry Reed, who had an important role in drafting State of the Sector Report for Financial Inclusion. With his wide knowledge about the microfinance sector, he is well known in the sector. He is also a senior fellow at Results and Results, a citizen advocacy group seeking to bring about legislation and policies that contribute to the elimination of extreme poverty around the world. Dr. Laurie was the director of the Micro Credit Summit campaign and the CEO of the Opportunity International Network. He has authored the Global State of the Ultra Poverty, the State of the Microcredit Summit campaign reports from 2010 to 2016 and has contributed to several books on finance and the poor, including The New World of Microfinance, Serving with the Poor in Africa, Globalization and Kingdom of God, and More Pathways Out of Poverty. I request Dr. Larry Reed to deliver keynote address of the conference.
Good afternoon. It is a great honor to be with you. I'd like to welcome Dr. Heggade. Thank you very much for inviting me here to be part of this conference, and welcome the Honorable Minister. Thank you for gracing us with your presence here. All the other leaders of financial institutions and self-help movements who are here with us, and honorable delegates. They've already given me the honors, so I guess it doesn't matter what I say now. I've already got them. But I do want to, I'm reminded here of a group of anthropologists who were working in the Stone Age parts of Papua New Guinea. And after many years of research, the people of the tribe said, "You've come here investigating us so often, why have you never invited us to your home so we could investigate you?" And so they talked amongst themselves and said, well, it's a fair question. So they organized some funds, and they brought the leaders of this group to London, to visit London, and they brought them just so they would sort of make the culture shock as big as possible, they immediately flew them into London and then up into the Eye of London to see the whole city. And so these men and women were quite surprised, and they looked out and they would say, "What is this building here?" And they would say, "Oh, that's a mutual society that owns that building." And what is this tall building over here? "Well, that's a bank." And this one over here, that's an investment house. And this one way down here, what is that? That's St. Paul's Cathedral. And what is this over here? Well, that is the Catholic Church. And they scratched their heads and said, "It's funny, here in this country, your money houses are so much bigger than your spirit houses." And I'm glad to be here in India where money houses and spirit houses can coexist, and where the two groups can talk to each other. My theme is on how self-help groups will be the ones that lead India out of extreme poverty. But to start on that theme, I want to take you to another country, to the country of Nicaragua. And a group that we had, when I was working with Opportunity, we used a variation of village banking. We called them trust groups. And so it was poor women gathered together to save money together, to learn together, and to invest together, also to work on community issues together. And we had a researcher working with us, a woman named Geraldine Sheehan, who said, "You're missing something that's going on here. The way you develop trust groups, by developing leadership within the group, by having those leaders run the meetings, by having them solve their own problems, raise their own funds, and deal with their own challenges." She said, "You are developing a leadership laboratory here, and you are not giving these women enough space to exercise their leadership." So we took her up on her challenge, and we brought all of the women from the different trust groups in one community called La Laguna and asked them, "What is the issue that you want to work on together?" And they said, "We want to work on the water supply. We used to have a water supply in this community, but after the earthquake was 10 years ago, after the earthquake, everything shifted and the water's no longer in the reservoir and we get no water anymore." Well, they began planning. We worked with them. We brought in a hydrologist to work with them to give them advice. And over time, the women helped to lay out the grid for how the water supply would be delivered, how to rework the reservoir so that water would flow into it, the pump, the water tower, everything they figured out together with the hydrologist. And then came time to work, and the women picked up pickaxes and were digging trenches in volcanic rock, going up to where the water tower would be built, eventually shamed the men into joining them. And over 6 months, they were able to establish a water supply that flowed not only to them and their poor communities, but to everyone in the village where they were. So the women in 6 months had created a water supply that served everyone. Now the interesting thing is, a foreign government had been giving money to this town to redo their water supply for over 8 years, and they had not gotten anything done. And yet, when these women got organized together, in 6 months, they got done what the others could not get done. So let me talk to you about why they were able to get done what others could not, and what that means for how self-help groups can lead the way to the ending of extreme poverty here in India. First, by organizing these people together in groups, these women together in their groups, we were actually building on something that people living in poverty do all the time. The way you survive when you're in poverty, when you don't know what is going to happen to you next, when other people have power over decisions that mean whether you get educated or not, whether your children are healthy or not, whether you live or die, you learn to survive by banding together, by relying on each other, by finding other people you can depend on, because sometimes you will not have the strength to go on, but you can rely on other people to have that strength for you. And some days they will not have the strength, but you will supply it for them. So groups is really a means of survival for people living in poverty. That is the basic building block for survival, for dealing with all the vagaries that they have to deal with around them, relying on each other. So working through groups is a way of working through a system that people in poverty have already developed. The second thing that's important about groups is that groups bring transformational change. And let's just think about it for each of you. Think about the most important changes that you've gone through in your life. Significant changes that made you see the world differently, that made you take on different tasks, that maybe made you feel differently about yourself. Did that happen when you were alone off by yourself thinking new thoughts? Or did that happen when you were with a group of people who challenged you to think differently, who supported you, who educated you, and who walked with you as you began to try these new things? Even when you failed, were there to pick you up. I know for me, the biggest changes that have occurred in my life, the things that have made the biggest difference to me and to my family, have been because I've been part of groups that have held me accountable, that have told me, if you say you value this, the way you're living doesn't seem to match. And so groups can be the basis for seeing ourselves truly and for making changes we desire to change but find too difficult to make on our own. So the work in La Laguna not only built on what the poor people were already doing, but it was doing it through a form through which change becomes possible. Thirdly, that change becomes transformational when the groups have good leadership. And that's what our entire work was in working with the groups in La Laguna and in trust banks throughout the world. We worked to develop leadership in those groups. That meant that the groups learned to draw up their own agenda. They learned to take minutes at their meetings. They learned to refer back to the minutes, to the decisions that they had made. They learned to elect their leaders and to rotate leaders. Someone couldn't hold leadership forever. There were terms, and people changed at the end of terms. That way everyone got the chance to be a leader. And so we facilitated in developing strong leadership, and with strong leadership, strength can emerge from the group. The group can manage its strengths together. A strong leadership can build on what is there in the group, which is the fourth point. Good group work, strong groups, transformational groups, build on the assets they already have. You don't start with weaknesses, you start with assets. What is there? What strengths do they bring? How can you use those strengths in order to make the change that they want to see happen? The fifth point about the groups, one of the most important ones, I'll have to see if you've got this already, see if you understand. Why was it the poor women of La Laguna that were able to bring the water supply there when the government had not been able to, when the wealthy people of the community had not been able to do it, but the poor women did do it? What made the difference? Why were they were the ones that could make the change? Any ideas, any suggestions? Their need? Yeah, they needed it. That was probably it. They had the most need. They felt the most pain from not having it. You see, the wealthy could make a workaround. They could have trucks deliver water to their homes. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't as good as having a clean water supply, but they made do with that, and they were okay. For the poor women without water supply, it meant that every day they had to queue up at a stream and fill buckets and bring them back to their homes. It was backbreaking work day after day. It was time spent away from family and from their businesses. They felt the pain first, and they felt it most acutely. So they were the ones that were motivated to make the change. Now, the importance of this point, I want to illustrate it from something a discovery that was made here in India, not too far away from here in Tamil Nadu, in Vellore, in the leprosy mission there in Vellore. There was a man by the name of Dr. Paul Brand, born here in India, trained in the UK, came back to work in the leprosy mission. And at that time, people were not very clear about what caused leprosy. The sense was it was some sort of communicable disease that spread from the fingers of people who were lepers, and it got in, it started eating away at your flesh. Well, what Dr. Brand discovered was it was not a disease that did it. What it was a syndrome that caused the deadening of the nerves in your fingers and toes. So without the ability to feel in your fingers and toes, what people who were lepers did, they ended up injuring. They ended up overusing their fingers. They ended up stepping on things and not feeling that they had punctured the skin. And that's the way that disease and bacteria got in, to the point that it started eating away what was there, and skin would either fall off or they would have to have it amputated when the bacteria was threatening to infect the rest of their body. So I heard Dr. Brand give a speech a while ago, and his speech was on the theme of the gift of pain. And the reason he said pain is a gift, he said pain is a signal to our body that something is going wrong and we need to do something to stop it from happening. Otherwise, worse pain is coming. So pain is a gift. We have to pay attention to it. And for lepers, because the disease deadened the nerves, they couldn't hear the signal, and they couldn't pay attention and stop what was happening that was causing the pain. In our society, I believe that people on the margins are the people who feel the pain first. They're the ones we need to listen to.